and the love for the community engagement. Married for 13 years, Jesse and Claire are proud parents of their daughter, Brea, who is 1.5. They've also had the privilege of hosting 6 teenage boys from all over the world who continue to be cherished members of their family. Balancing family life and business, Jesse is driven to achieve personal and professional success, inspiring others to create their own definition of freedom. And I am very honored and proud to introduce Jesse Ernst with Ernst Financial.
What Jim didn't tell you is that he's the speaker next month in a couple weeks, so make sure you come back for him. It's an honor being here. I appreciate everybody who came out tonight. I appreciate my beautiful wife is over here, Claire, wave. We did drop Brea off with the babysitter, and she was just like, bye, Mommy, because they have a bunny. So she was excited to hang out over there. So I'm not really going to add anything to what Jim said, other than he is speaking, I think it's in a few weeks, not the last Tuesday of the month, so check the date on that, grab the flyer in the back. But today, we're talking, hang on. Let's thank our sponsor and host, Mega Workplace. Pam is the owner of this building. She's busy, but thank you for hosting. I don't know who was in charge of the music earlier, but I did hear Jesse's girl when I walked in. Thank you to our patron sponsors, United Southern Bank. Very good showing here, almost the entire middle row. Well, they split up into 2 different levels. I thought they were going to take the whole middle row and kick anybody who's not here to speak out. So, this is who I am. I'm a personal finance, business, and career coach. But we want to talk today about redefining success and reimagining freedom. I want to play a quick game with you guys. See if you guys can finish these sentences with me, okay? And I'll let you know there's some trick questions in here. All right? All right, if you don't, at first, don't succeed. Try. All right, the clicker is. Actually, it's don't try skydiving. He who dies with the most toys. See, really knew. A little bit morbid, but all right. Practice makes
permanent.
Wrong.
Permanent.
Practice makes permanent. If you practice something the wrong way,
It's going to be permanently wrong.
it's going to be permanently the wrong way. All right. And then this one is my own, so you're probably not going to get it. But success is how do you define it? Okay. Any other guesses? It is how you define it. So that's a great answer. So Jermaine just like trump card. Nobody's going to get that answer in this one. I like to say success is not cookie cutter. Okay? It is how you define it. It's not cookie cutter unless you run a cookie business, and then in which case it might be a cookie cutter. But I don't know anybody in here who's running a cookie business. Just crazy, right? When we talk about success, my definition early on in life was a little bit skewed. So don't ask my wife to verify. She'll unfortunately verify this. I'm the third of 4 brothers, which means I am ridiculously competitive. Okay. Thanks, Ray. I'm competitive to a fault, and thankfully we have good enough friends that stick around even when I am competitive to a fault. Okay. But to me, early on in my childhood, I have 2 brothers who are older than me, one that's 12 years younger than me, so don't think about him. I wasn't in competition with him. I was in competition with my older brothers. Right? And my definition of success depended on what they did, who they became, and the accomplishments that they had. So the thirdborns always run around following them, although I did learn a successful thing early on. If they get in trouble for something, don't follow them to do that. But my definition was constantly a comparison definition. How many of us in this room would say we have at one point in our lives defined success by comparing it to somebody else? We compare it to somebody else who we believe is successful. I get into a business and I follow somebody who is successful in that business. Now, if somebody's successful in that business, take some of their thoughts, take some of their ideas with permission, right? Nothing copyrighted. Don't steal things you shouldn't be stealing. But if it's a concept or an idea that's working, Yeah, use that, but don't try to become that person. See, I tried to become what my older brothers were. And had I continued to have that thought process and that mindset, I would have climbed a ladder that led to a destination that I didn't want to be at. Jim and I were having a conversation a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about somebody who was working for a promotion, and they're not in that promotion for 20 minutes, and then they're thinking about the next promotion, right? Climbing that ladder, getting that next sale, getting that next fill in the blank. So, what is success? What is personal success? Jermaine stole my thunder. I was leading up to it's going to be personally defined. So if you came here for a definition of success, I'm sorry you're not going to get a flat out, write out definition of success. You can take this, take it to the bank, take it to USB and cash it. But we're going to talk about how we define success and redefine it for ourselves. I'm very, very different than both of my older brothers. My oldest brother, I'm going to brag on him for a second. Successful, right? So we're gonna get that out of the way. He's a book smart nerd, can read a book, turn around and tell you everything that he just read. He did these things called CLEP tests, college level examination prep test. He clept out of 3 years of college. He just tested out of 3 years of college. Show up, take the test, get the credit, all right, moving on. Ended up with his undergrad in like 18 months with a 4.0. I'm a C's get degrees kind of student, right? But I got the degree. Our middle brother between us is 18 months older than me. A little bit of ADD, just a little bit. So I did catch up to him in school, but it was from, grinding it out, just hard work. So we get to college, we enter at the same time, and we take a sports physiology, like very technical scientific class. The final comes around. He's like, I'm off to play ping pong. I was like, hey, we got this final tomorrow. We need to study. Let's study together. I'm highlighting, I'm making note cards, I'm making flashcards, I'm doing all the things. The next morning we get up, we're walking to the test. He's like, hey, let me see the textbook. He reads my highlights, my note cards, and scores 10 points higher on the test. I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter at all. But he's an auditory learner, so he hears things and he retains it, so he doesn't need to read the book. I'm a hands-on learner, so reading the book and listening to the stuff, none of it made sense to me. I actually have to get in there and do stuff. So what is personal success? Now, I'm going to show you guys some stats that unfortunately are going to be a little bit of a downer, okay? We got to get the downer stuff out of the way. But we're going to break the mold of what today's society seems to be saying to us about what success is. We want to redefine it, not just accept another definition. I don't want you to accept my definition. I want you to actually, when we leave here tonight, later on tonight, this week, I want you to actually do some homework as to where you're defining it for yourself. You're defining what your success is, what a win is for you, and what freedom means to you. But I am going to share some stories of my life, mine and Claire's life, and what freedom is to us, what success is to us. So we want to reimagine it from what the American dream is. So what is the American dream? Jermaine's got trump cards, so we're going to wait and let him go first. Nobody else will respond. James.
Run your own business and have a family.
Run your own business, have a family. Okay. Alan?
Picking up on own your own business and have a family would be own your own home, own 2 cars in the driveway, that whole kind of.
You can only drive 1 car at a time, Alan. What do you need 2 cars for?
I have 5, so.
Yeah, Alan's a car guy. Alan's a car guy. Tell me if this narrative sounds familiar to you guys. Get good grades so you get into a good school. So you get accepted into a good school, like they're doing you a favor. By the way, don't bother looking at the price tag. Just accept that you got into a good school, go there at all costs, no matter the cost, pay for it later, so that you can get a good job. They don't tell you so that you can pay the student loans. So that you can get a good job, so you can have the house, the 2 to 5 cars, depending on if you're a car person or not. You gotta have the 2 to 5 car garage as well. So you gotta have some land and some property. You gotta have the 1.3 kids, I guess is what the standard is now. And the exotic vacations. What's not focused on in that is the American narrative right now is focused on major, not focused on career. It's focused on school, not focused on education. Hey, we got a water park. And check out our football team. Obviously, it's not Florida, but
Wow.
sorry, guys, I had to take the shot. It's not focused on the final cost of education, but you can hope, pray, and vote for student loan forgiveness later. It's not focused on the practicality of transportation that gets you from point A to point B, but it's focused on what is everybody going to think about the car that you drive. A little bit of insight. Ain't nobody thinking about the car you drive because they're thinking about what you're thinking about what the car they drive is. We're all thinking about what does other people think about us. The idea of success has become about looking successful. Why do y'all think I wore a sports coat today? So I can look successful while I talk about success. It's the idea of looking successful in the externals rather than focusing on the internals. You know, some of the most successful people and the happiest people and the freest people I know are people who don't care what other people think. Okay, so here's the, unfortunately, the downer stats. 1 in 3 Americans admit to struggling or being in financial crisis. Only 36% of Americans say that they're winning with money. All right, so there's another third, and then we got some kind of middle third. And only 40% of Americans say that they feel good about their financial future. And when we sent the slides, the format got messed up, so I apologize. We are the most indebted country in the world, with $70 trillion, trillion with a T, in national debt. That's the American nightmare, right? Not the American dream. And household American savings, 1 in 4 Americans say they have no emergency fund or savings, and over half of Americans feel uncomfortable with the level of savings that they have. So, we have to redefine success. What is success to you? How do we break this mold? We define it for ourselves. Success is not cookie cutter. We have to stop the comparison with they. We have to stop the comparison with what other people think, what other people drive, where other people live, what neighborhood they live in, what college they went to. How many of y'all have asked your doctor what school they went to? Does anybody know what school your doctor went to? No, y'all just don't go to the doctor, do you? I'm right there with you. I don't remember last time we went to the doctor. But we don't care.
I didn't ask him his grades.
And you didn't ask me his grades or GPA, right?
But I hope that he
Don't
didn't
ask me my
do
GPA because I was seeing 53 students, so that's all I want to know about that. It's not dependent on what anybody else thinks or how anybody else defines success and freedom. You have to intentionally define it for yourself and go all in on you. When I went off to college, 6 foot, just shy of 6'5", but I was 185 pounds, so that's 50 pounds ago for those of y'all wondering. 50 plus pounds ago, give or take 5 or 10. But I went to a small Christian college. When I was growing up, I did grow up in Mexico. We had to teach other people how to play basketball. So I thought I was really good at basketball because everybody else was this tall, besides my brothers. But you know, it just wasn't that big of a competition. So unfortunately, I had this idea that I was big stuff, and I was going to try out for the basketball team. So I tried out for the basketball team. Well, our coach had an idea of what a successful team looked like. So for the first 3 weeks, you don't touch a ball. You run. You show up at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night after the night classes were done, and until 8 o'clock to 9, 9:30, 9:55, he would push it as close to 10 o'clock as possible. You were running laps, running miles, running suicides. He would go out there 30 minutes before and rake the sand volleyball courts and make us run in the sand. And when you rake sand, it makes you sink down to about your knees in the sand. All right? And we would run these things called ladders, which is a sadistic, different way of running suicides. You'd run down and you'd have to walk all the way around, and you'd run up 1, 2, 3, and then you'd have to come all the way back around. And just hope and pray that somebody slow was in front of you to catch your breath. And ain't none of them slow. So, the first week, 90 plus guys show up to tryouts. The second week, about 65. And by the third week, 30 guys show up. And the last 2 days of the third week of tryouts is on the court, show off, do some skills, and do some drills, and over 100 guys show up. Coach Ketch has a clipboard. How many names y'all think he has on there? 100? No, he's got about 30 names on I think on his clipboard during running, it said, make everyone barf. But this one I knew only had 30 names on it because he knew what success looked like. So I tried out and I got cut and I went to coach and I said, hey coach, what do I need to do? He's like, you're too skinny, you're gonna get broken. At this level of competition, you'll get broken in half. 185 pounds at 6'5" is not very thick. So from the beginning of my freshman year to the end of my sophomore year, I put on 50 pounds in the gym, not in the cafeteria. So I was like, all right, better chances. And he said, well, now you're slow. I tried out 3 years in a row and I got cut 3 years in a row. My motivation wasn't the greatest motivation for even trying out. Yeah, I love basketball and I enjoy it. I played intramural in college and had a great team, still connected to some of the guys on that team. But part of my motivation was still wrapped up in success equals comparison, and neither of my older brothers had ever played. So if I did that, I would be successful. That's a pretty warped sense of success. My definition was off. But now definition, I'm not great with slides, so I might get ahead or behind on slides. Now my definition is to have financial and time freedom to meet the needs of my family, not just financially, but emotionally, and presence with quality time, and contribute to my community. The interesting thing is, with every single client that I coach, we do an exercise. And that exercise is, let's talk about your goals. Now, we're coming up towards the end of the year, so some of y'all are thinking about goals and New Year's resolutions and what do I want to accomplish. You know the biggest flaw with coming up with goals is? It's a checklist. And then if we don't meet that checklist, we think we're failures. So when we exhaust the list of goals, I say, now tell me about your dreams. Because we're knocking down the walls of what some of those goals are. And now we're thinking a little bit bigger. And I've always dreamed of going to Paris. I've always dreamed of this. I've always dreamed of that. And then to finish out that exercise, I say, now let's set that list aside of goals and dreams. Somebody, what would be awesome? Because when you just talk about what would be awesome, there's no boxes to check. There's no walls to have to run through. There's no I'm successful or I'm a failure because I finished everything on my list. It's just this would be awesome. The first time another coach asked me that question, I said, I want to go to all 50 states and all 7 continents by age 50. You know, I had never verbalized that before, but somewhere in the recesses of the back of my brain, I thought that would be awesome. And then I was like, that's doable. But until I actually verbalized it, until I actually said it, until I actually wrote it down, it seemed like it was just, oh, that'd be awesome, but that's for other people. Sometimes we think of success the same way and freedom the same way. That's for other people. Must be nice. Must be nice to be able to fill in the blank. Must be nice to drive a Tesla. I mean, I'm not a Tesla guy, but I like analog. The other day I was having a conversation, actually in the parking lot here, and it started to rain, and somebody with a Tesla, I won't mention the name, but they tried to summon their vehicle with their phone, and it started pulling out, and somebody else was backing up, and the car got confused and stopped. And he had to run across the parking lot to go get his car that was supposed to come get him. And I just tapped on my truck, and I said, analog, baby, analog. The interesting thing is when I do the goals, dreams, and what would be awesome exercise, what commonly comes up is everybody says, I want more time with my family. I don't want to have to worry about money. Doesn't mean, and that definition doesn't mean I need $10 million in the bank, so I just never have to go to work again. I just don't have to worry about money. And they want work that matters and a purpose. So starting a business is a great measure of success for some people. For some people, they can't handle the stress. Right? And then you got to worry about the business money and the personal money, and for some people that's a great measure of success. The interesting thing is when I look at my goals, my dreams, my aspirations, and my why that motivates me for everything that I do, it's faith, family, freedom, and impact. And on some level, every single one of us, when we think through our goals, our dreams, our aspirations, our what would be awesomes, it does almost always, I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, I haven't tracked it, but I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, Those three things come up, if at least a couple of them. So how do we reimagine freedom? Well, I appreciate you asking that. Freedom is not just financial freedom, although most of my clients are financial coaching clients who are like, I don't know how to handle money. It was never taught in school. They didn't teach us this. They didn't tell us that. They didn't tell us that our minimum payments weren't going to pay off these massive student loans and the balance goes up faster than the payments to take them down. Very first clients that I coached had taken out $300,000 in student loan debt to be in the medical field. So they're like, I don't make the money back. And it's true to a certain extent, but at 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, they weren't told that your minimum payments aren't going to pay this off. And all the bankers are nodding their heads. So they made the minimum payments for 8 years, and then when they hired me as their coach, they had $360,000 in student loan debt. Like, how did it go up by 20%? Because we weren't educated, we weren't taught, we weren't informed. So financial freedom is a big piece, but financial freedom without time freedom means nothing. I got all the money in the world, but I have to work 90 hours a week, and I can't spend time with my family, and I can't have dinner with my family, and I can't go and do and be, then financial freedom means nothing. And if we have all the time freedom in the world because we don't work and we have no money, then, I mean, we got time, but we ain't got any money. But we got love, baby. That's how, every other country song goes. In fact, I'm actually I'm coaching another coach who came to me and he's like, how do you do what you do during daytime hours? I was like, what do you mean? He's coaching nights, he's coaching weekends, he's coaching all the times when his family is off. And I said, well, I go into my calendar and I hit delete on the hours that I don't want to work. And I put everything through a filter: faith, family, time, and freedom. Faith, family, time, freedom, and impact. And if it pushes up against those things, I ain't doing it. And if that means I go get a 9 to 5 and don't work for myself, I gotta be there for my family first. So we've begun working with him. He actually, cool thing, texted me on Monday that he just made his largest proposal ever, and he's like, I can delete like 3 hours off my calendar if I get this client. I'm like, that's awesome. That client really replaced the income of 4 other clients. But we had to figure out what his why was. And all he was focused on was the financial freedom. And yeah, by the metrics, by the revenue, his business is superior to mine. But by the time, by the freedom, by the impact, by the joy that I have, I said, dude, you're gonna burn out. You're gonna do this until you hate it. I love what I do. I put boundaries on my calendar so that I don't become a workaholic. I love what I do. And Claire's actually said this a couple times. She's like, I've never seen you enjoy your work this much. I'm probably annoying about it sometimes. And there's times where we're at dinner with friends and she's like, hey, you're putting your coaching hat on. Can you just be you? I love what I do, so I have to put boundaries on it to not overdo it. But I also have to put boundaries on it so that 10 years from now, I'm still able to do it. To me, that's part of what success is. Boundaries don't limit my freedom, they limit my impulsivities. Boundaries actually help me be who I want to be and do what I want to do.
Can you repeat that, please?
I'm going to think of what I just said.
Boundaries.
Boundaries don't limit my freedom, they limit my impulsivities. And just make sure you put my name by it so when you quote me. TN, right? So I had a lot of fun. I've had the honor of coaching multiple businesses. I coach individuals. And I have to catch myself sometimes not coaching my family. But Claire and I had to sit down and define what freedom was to us. And freedom's being a little bit weird. And weird's fun because normal's broke, normal's stressed, normal is. Did you know that in the last 5 years, America, I'm gonna mess up the statistic, I didn't write it all the way down, but the number of people on antidepressants and medications has more than doubled in the last 5 years. Because our American dream has us stressed out. Our American dream has us chasing thing after thing and getting stuffitis to where we're payment after payment after payment to try to keep up with the Joneses. But the Joneses are payment after payment after payment trying to keep up with the Smiths And everybody's just trying to keep up with themselves, and they're stuck in this rat race. And they get to the end, and they say, what was all that for? So Claire and I have two different perspectives, and it's a blessing and a curse, right? She says that I'm the weight to her balloon, I keep her from just floating off. And I say she's the balloon to my weight, so if you've ever seen a balloon with a weight in the wind, it actually still moves. The weight doesn't just stay stuck in the mud. So we had set a goal to pay our house off early. Now, our mortgage was the only debt that my wife and I have ever had. We've cash flowed all of our cars, we worked our tails off in college. I graduated with like 5 cents in my bank account, but by golly, it was my 5 cents. So we had, the day after, I exaggerate slightly, slightly after we got our mortgage, I was like, let's pay it off, let's get rid of it. We did have to spend some money on the house. We had Pepto-Bismol pink colored carpet. It was from the 80s and it still looked like the 80s, so we needed to bring it forward about 40 years. So we remodeled and we redid it, and I was like, what if I have no life for 3 years and pay our mortgage off? Let's be those weirdos. And my wife's like, I'm not that weird. She's like, we can aim for like 10 years. It's still beating everybody else if that's what you need to do, but I still need to travel. Now, I want y'all to understand the perspective. At the time, I was a student pastor, so I worked with 6th to 12th graders all day, every day, nonstop, lots of energy, lots of life ahead of them. She was a cardiac nurse with people who'd just been cracked open, and were like, man, I got a lot of life behind me, and I don't know how much life ahead of me, and they put an artificial valve in, let's hope this thing holds up. So she's seeing a completely different people group every single day. She's like, I don't want to get to the end and have regret. And I'm like, yeah, but we get out all this freedom. And so we had to find this balance. So I said 3 years, she said 10. We compromised right in the middle at 8. For those of you doing math, that's not right in the middle. But we talked about what our why was. We talked about what freedom was. We talked about what was actually important, even more so than just dollars and cents. Now, I'm a nerd. I get into dollars and cents and spreadsheets, and I'm having a heyday. Okay? Apparently we got some bankers who are dollars and cents spreadsheet nerds. We like a good spreadsheet, color coded, and all the things. Yeah, all the colors mean a different thing. And you know, if you know the code, look at it and glance, I know everything that's going on. I have nerded out hard. I know what our retirement money will be like if we make 8 or 10 or 12, or if we hit a dream number of 15%, which is unlikely, but hey, you know, we can dream, right? What would be awesome? I know what all that is at 50, 55, 60, 65 because I have a spreadsheet. So I annoy my wife when it comes to numbers. She's like, give me the highlights, give me the 5-second, the 90-second version. Give me the 90-second version or you lose me, okay? So we set a goal, and we compromised right in the middle, but we said by Jesse's 35th birthday, let's pay the house off. Because how cool is that, right? How fun is that? Well, so we set a plan in place. We knew that we were on track to hit that plan, and then all of a sudden, the free spirit comes and talks to the nerd and says, hey, we got a baby coming. Can we do it by her birthday? And I'm like, yes. Hang on, let me go do a spreadsheet. And I did another spreadsheet. Surprise, color-coded. I did little boxes. Each little box was $1,000, and it was in the shape of a house so that I could color in my house. But I didn't want to, I'm not an artist, so I didn't want to do it manually. I wanted to use a spreadsheet. We missed our daughter's birthday by 3 weeks and paid it off on Claire's birthday. And she turned 33. And it was 9 months before my 35th birthday. We had to even redefine our redefinition of success. So even when you go and do the work and say, this is what success is for me, this is what success is for my family, this is what freedom looks like to me, I have to redefine it and tweak it and iterate it and change it and shift it with the times. Because I don't want to be normal. Normal's broke, normal's stressed, normal's possibly on pills if we're in America now, and I don't want any of that. And I don't tell you this story to brag, I tell you because that's what the definition was for us. For us, it was eliminating the mortgage. For us, it was 10 weeks into her 12-week maternity leave, she says, I don't want to go back to work. I said, don't. And some of y'all who have been around a while might remember the meme, and I'm going to mess it up, but the person who's going, we ain't got no bills. Some of y'all remember that, some of y'all don't. Just think I'm crazy. But for us, it's creating and sticking to a budget and a plan to not give into our impulsivities. And I believe this, and we've been practicing it. It's allowed us to travel because she's the balloon to my weight. In the time that we were still paying off our house, we traveled, by my best estimation, to 7 different countries. We've been to 4 different continents together, been all over the U.S. Our daughter is 22 months old now. She's been to 13 states and 3 countries. Because for us, that's what our definition of freedom is. That's what matters to us. For me, when I started my coaching business, I said, I don't think I want to work on Fridays. And I didn't have the freedom then, but I was like, I'm going to work to make sure that I have the freedom. And from the start, I said, this is what freedom looks like. So I'm going to implement some things now to have the business 5 years from now that I still want to have. And I only work Monday through Thursday. Except busy time at the crepe shop, and then you might see us behind the counter. But other than that, I was trying to think of all the trips that we've gone on this year, and I lost count. Right? Some of them are 3-day trips to see mom and dad. Some of them are 2-week trips to Europe. We took the entire crepe routine to Paris with us. We closed the shop and took everybody with us to Paris for a week this summer. And that's freedom for us. That's success. That was hey, what would be awesome? And then once we started with what would be awesome, then we had to back up to what's realistic, what can we do? And we didn't cover the whole thing for them, but we were able to exercise a generosity muscle with some young ladies who work for us. We've been in business for 5 years. One young lady's been with us for 5 years. One's been with us for 4, and one was with us for 2.5 until she finished her degree and is now working in her field, which is unheard of. Yeah. The entrepreneurs in the world in the room know that, right? And so we're like, let's celebrate 5 freaking years of business. Why? Because we know the statistics. 1 in 5 businesses will close in the first 2 years. 50% of businesses close in the first 5 years. So once we cross that mile marker, we wanted to do that. But you have to intentionally define what that is for you and then go all in on you. So a couple years ago, we went all in on us. Claire went all in on us before I knew we were going all in on us. So we're sitting at lunch one day with our friend Michael, who was visiting from out of town, and she picked up the phone and walked away, which she never does that. And I was like, okay, interesting, must be important. She comes back, and I'm going to throw her under the bus for just barely. Her worst quality, Claire's worst quality is her storytelling. Because she'll pause at the worst time. She comes back and sits down and says, I did a thing. Long pause. Like probably that long. She said, so I sent an email. Long pause. Part of this email is Ray's fault too. Then before she tells me about the email and what it's all about, she tells me, so Mount Dora is going to have this multi-vendor marketplace. And hey, do you remember when we went to New York City and we went to Chelsea Market and we had crepes and it was amazing? And it was like this rabbit trail of nostalgia trying to get me to smell and taste and remember the senses of Chelsea Market and how amazing and delicious that white chocolate with strawberry crepe was that we had with some of our international students. And then she comes back around to the point. Long pause. She says, so the Mount Dora Marketplace is going to be kind of like that. And I sent an email saying, hey, we'd like to open a crepe shop. And we'd like to do what? We? Who's we? You and who? Ray had given her a book called Be Brave, I think is what it was. And so she was being brave, but I hadn't read the book, so I wasn't all that brave. So she sent this email and got a form email back saying, hey, we had 75 applicants, we only have 11 spots for vendors. So she was like, it didn't matter, so she didn't tell me, she just forgot. It wasn't intentional. She's like, so the owners of the building want to see our business plan tomorrow. We're not business owners, we're not business leaders, we've never run a business, neither of us have actually ever worked in food industry. So we enrolled in YouTube University that night. We stayed up until 1 o'clock in the morning, put together a business plan, that thankfully we used our own funding because USB would have laughed us out of the building if we asked for funding. Looking at that business plan, it was about 3 pages long. And so our idea was if we put it down and then we put samples on top of it and use it more as a placemat, they won't even realize how bad it is, and maybe they'll like us enough to. 5 years later, we have a great room.
Nice.
So
Hold on.
she was on pause.
Right.
She was braver than I was. However, I will say this, that had we not taken the step and gone all in on us for that, I don't know that I would have had the guts and the wherewithal to launch my business. I don't know that I would be where I am today, speaking to you guys, working with the clients that I've worked with. In just over 4 years, the clients that I've worked with have paid off over $3 million in personal debt.
Wow.
And had she not been sent her a book called Be Brave, and she hadn't sent an email and told a painfully long story with really terrible pauses at just the wrong times, I don't know what success would look like to us. And that's really, really cool. But we've had the opportunity to iterate. We were successful in our careers before. We go all in, like we just go all in when we go in. Okay? I mean, I put 50 pounds of muscle on trying to get on a basketball team that I got cut from 2 more times. I went all in. We went all in. We sat down and we said, well, we have this much cash. We don't do debt. We only had to sign a 6-month lease. Guess what, guys? I made a spreadsheet. And a business budget that if we have this many part-time employees and we fill in this many hours and we can pay this much in payroll and we have this much in rent and all the stuff, if we made $0 in sales, we would go through exactly $10,000 in 6 months. And that's what we had. And we went all in on us. And 6 weeks later, we made our money back. And it's because of her right there being brave and going all in. I mentioned earlier my why is family, freedom, impact, and legacy. We all want to matter. We want the work that we do to matter. We want it to touch lives and have impact. For us, when we define it, it means we're free to take extended trips, invest in our daughter's future, have now nap time has changed, so lunch doesn't always happen with the baby, but 2 to 3 meals a day with my wife and daughter every single day. I coach who I want to coach because I don't know anybody anything, so if I don't like the person, then I don't take them on as a client. It's kind of fun. Free for Claire to go and quit her job and just stay at home mom, free to cut our house off and just enjoy freedom. I joke around since I don't work on Fridays, I say I'm 20% retired. Well, we define what success is for us. We define what freedom is for us. And we got clear on our why behind it. So I mentioned some homework. I mentioned some we all hated homework as kids. So in the coaching world, I redefine it as action items. Jason knows what I'm talking about. Call them action items, but it just means homework. Take some time to define what your best successful life is before the end of the week and before the weekend, because otherwise you're going to get into the weekend and do whatever you did last weekend, and it's just going to kind of disappear. Take some time to imagine what freedom is. Write down your goals. Go ahead and do your 2025 goals, do your dreams, and go one step further and say, what would be awesome? Figure out what your why is. Your why is your driving factor on why you're going to go all in on you and why you're going to keep going when it sucks. When I have to clean out a grease trap at Claire's Drapery, it is the most disgusting thing I have to do. And usually it happens after hours, and I'm the only one in the building, and it's 11 o'clock at night, cleaning out a grease trap. So I need a good why to keep cleaning up the grease trap every 4 to 6 months. But our freedom is our why. Impact is our why. That shop right there has allowed us community connections that we never had before. So that's your homework. That's your takeaway. Living financially free gives us peace even when crisis comes. Because everybody in this room, I think everybody, Colt might be the exception. He's a young guy anyway. We've lived through 9/11. You're still around 9/11? Don't
I was in the womb for 9/11. So
Okay.
I was here.
I don't remember.
Okay. There might be 3 people in the room who don't remember
Tate.
9/11, COVID, wars, economic crisis. You gotta have a solid why. You know what success is to us and what freedom is to us. So that even when the world's going to hell in a handbasket, we're pressing forward. Thank you guys for having me tonight.
Before you step away, does anybody have questions, comments? Gonna open that up real quick. If that's a no, I'm gonna start with mine. Okay, sounds like a no, so I'm gonna start with mine. Talk to me a little bit about your process. When someone comes to you as a new client, you talked about the lack of financial education. I'm a banker, going on 10 years now. You're laughing. You're probably gonna laugh a lot more. 0 financial education before I started in banking. Lots now, thank God for banking. What is that process like? And follow-up question, a lot of people are not educated, not just financially, but on how banking works. Does that play a role in your process?
So I'm going to answer the second one first and the first one second.
Okay, that's cool.
I don't play a huge role in banking. I know that USB and I know a few other bankers in the area that if I have a question, those are the people I'm going to pick up the phone and call.
I'll give you my card.
Okay. You know, unfortunately for USB, we didn't keep our mortgage around very long, but that is who we did have a mortgage with, so thank you all for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you.
When it comes to financial education and process, I'm going to back up and say that growing up, we didn't have financial conversations either. My parents, my dad, we would give him a hard time. We'd be like, hey Dad, tell us about a story when you were young. Not when you were a kid, it was like when you were young, so we get implied that he was super old. And a lot of them were his old football stories, which, you know, how true are they? I don't know. Football stories. He dislocated his shoulder his senior year in high school. According to the stories, he held his jersey in and went back in the game. But you know, it was the 70s, so that might actually be true. The first financial conversation I remember us having in my house, or at least with me, was pick a college you can afford. And you know, right?
Does not exist.
And funny thing is, a lot of the stories my dad told were about different jobs that he had, and I think he just wanted us to learn a good hard work ethic. So I grew up thinking, well, everybody works in college. Of course, I'm going to pick a college I can afford. That makes no sense. It wasn't until I got to college and had culture shock and realized that some people were just living off of mommy and daddy. And the guy in the room next to me had a 0.85 GPA one semester. He was not invited back by the faculty because he wasn't even attending classes. That was the first financial conversation we ever had. And then I ended up looking at the cost of college my senior year of high school and was like, whoa, that's expensive. So my brother and I took a gap year and worked, swinging a hammer, worked construction. But by the time I stepped on college campus, I had 13 grand saved in the bank. That's 17 and a half, almost, not 18. And all I knew, student loans wasn't in my vocabulary. All I knew was interest didn't make sense to me. I was like, why would I pay you $110 when I borrowed $100? Like, I want my own $10. Like, that was how educated I was at the time. So all I knew was that interest didn't make sense to me, loans didn't make sense to me. Drove crappy cars, even the first few years of our marriage, pretty crappy cars. And then right after we got married, my brother sent us Financial Peace University on DVD, which if anybody's familiar with Dave Ramsey, that's his course. And I saw his picture on the front, which he's an older, bald, white guy, and I was like, that's going to be boring. Stuck it on the shelf and ignored it. But he called or texted constantly, and I was like, babe, we got to watch these DVDs just so that he'll stop calling. And so that made sense to me. Once I watched it, and I was like, he's redneck hilarious. It made sense, and I wanted to hear what this hilarious redneck had to say about finances.
Who was that again?
Dave Ramsey.
Well, she calls herself that.
Yeah.
Not everybody's a fan, but it worked really well for us. And so as we started implementing just the little things that we knew and reading more books and just trying to get more information, people started asking us, and I was like, well, I better learn more. If someone's going to ask me, then I better know what I'm talking about. And so a lot of it was self-education, and a lot of it was intentionally going and looking for it. Because I've looked at previous generations in our own family, and not all of them are where I want to end up. And love them to death. Very, very kind, loving, amazing people. But when it came to finances, that wasn't going to be my source of knowledge. And so a lot of it is self-taught and asking people, finding out the people who are self-made millionaires, talking to other entrepreneurs when I want to be an entrepreneur. It's talking to somebody who's been there, done that. They bought the t-shirt so long ago it's got holes in it, right? And so now when I stepped into coaching, I have to continually level up, so I'm continually learning. But that's kind of the short version of that story, of starting to get some financial education.
What is the process when you're taking on a new client? How is that?
Yeah, so I do an intake session with anybody and everybody. I do an hour-long coaching session. Some coaches say, well, I don't want to give away the whole farm. I'm going to give you the whole farm, as much farm as I can give you in an hour and 15 minutes. So you see the value of it, and if you want more of that value, you're going to come back. The process there is, what does success mean to Alan? What are your goals, your dreams, your aspirations? What's awesome to you? And in that conversation, what's holding us back? What's missing from your picture now that's holding you back? And I'm not going to let you use excuses. There's some clients in this room who've done some absolutely amazing things, and they know that I don't let them use excuses, right? And so that, it's an intake session. However, in that intake session, if someone seems like they're not coachable, they're not teachable, they're going to try to convince me of their way, at the end of the coaching session, I'm not offering them more coaching. I'm just saying, any more questions? All right, see you later. If somebody's coachable and hungry and wanting to learn and saying, I've never been taught, I want to learn, what does coaching look like, then I make an offer at that point. But it's all going to be based on what the scope of work is and where they want to go, right? How deep we've got to go with that work. Yeah, great question. Okay.
What's the scope of your business sort of outside of the coaching? Like once you sort of do that intake process and then you want to go past that, what do you kind of help the clients to do?
So I'll use couples for example. With couples, I get to ask questions that their spouse is not allowed to ask in a room where they now have to answer the question because they've said, hold me accountable. Actually, to piggyback off of that, but come back to Alan, the very first question I ask a new client, not an intake conversation, a new client is on a scale from 1 to 10, how blunt may I be and how hard can I push you? Because I say anything you can't say can will be used against you in a coaching call.
The Jesse writes.
Right, these are your Jesse rights. These are coaching rights. So with couples, I'm allowed to ask questions that they're not allowed to ask. Sometimes it turns into almost counseling sessions, which isn't the original intent, but sometimes that's where we have to go. 90% of what I do is ask questions. I'll say 90% of what I do is ask questions and tell stories. And maybe 10% is advice. And here's your action items. But it's digging beneath the surface because on a realistic level, we're all pretty superficial people. I know almost everybody in this room on some superficial level. Obviously, I know Claire significantly better than the rest of you, right? It's different. And yet, if we were to sit with a coach, then that coach would probably draw some things out of her that I don't know and draw some things out of me that she doesn't know. Sentiments and emotions and thought processes and even asking questions about our past that maybe we've repressed about how we viewed finances, how we viewed success, how we viewed freedom, that we didn't know how to verbalize until somebody asked the question. I didn't even think about verbalizing 50 states and 7 continents until somebody said, hey, what would be awesome? And that's a very basic question. It's not rocket science. And that's all Jason wrote that one down. He's going to be asking that question, right? And so, my first 2 sessions, there's quite a bit of a process, and those become the formula for where we go in our subsequent sessions. Because Jane, and you're married, right? You and your husband are going to be very different than Ray and Danny, right? So if I'm talking to Ray and Danny, if I'm talking to Jim, or if I'm talking to Jane, it's going to be vastly different. And so I don't have a strict curriculum because success isn't cookie cutter. So I don't have a cookie cutter for coaching success. We use some things and some tried and true methods in the first 2 coaching sessions to really lay a foundation and say, here's, and dig at some roots. But once we've exposed those roots, then we have to diagnose the roots and go from there.
What do you do if somebody has an unhealthy motivation?
I question your motives. We also are digging at what's your why, right? And so if there's an unhealthy motivation, a lot of times when somebody actually verbalizes their motivation, they realize that it's unhealthy. Well, I give them, taking a page from Claire's book, awkward pauses, long pauses. Well, I want to make the basketball team because neither of my brothers did, and so I want to do something they didn't do. As soon as I verbalized that, I was like, wow, that was shallow. Pretty dumb. Now, I don't regret it. I learned a lot there, and I do enjoy the game and the sport, and it made me a better player. But the original motivation was super, super shallow.
Right.
Right?
I'm sorry if you already said this, but you said you start with goals, then dreams, and then what would be awesome. Once you've laid that out, where do you go from there?
That tells us where the person wants to go. We see where you are now, and then we try to work on identifying the obstacles. This is where I am, but so I'm in Eustis and I want to get to Atlanta. What are the obstacles? I got to get to I-75 as fast as possible. We get off 441 because there's too many lights and there's too many old people holding me back from getting to where I need to go, so I can get cruise control at 70 miles an hour, right? So we want to get the cruise control, we have to identify what are the blockers, what are the things holding us back, and get over those things. Because I don't want to take 441 all the way out of Florida. I want to get to I-75 as fast as possible. Great questions. Jim, is your? No. Scratching your nose.
We like 441.
We're
the old people, you're getting
That just means your why is just a little bit different, Jim. That's all that is. That's okay.
Jesse, do you ever, if you're mentoring an entrepreneur or a numbers person or whoever, do you ever bring the spouse in on those conversations?
Almost always.
Yeah.
Yeah. Entrepreneurs, businesses are the only times where I don't require the spouse to be there if we're talking strictly business, but if we're talking personal finance, I won't coach half of a couple because my belief is that 2 become 1, and so I'm not coaching half. If one person starts going in this direction towards financial freedom and the other person's resisting, all I'm doing is creating additional friction. So I will not coach half of a couple. The only exception is, hey, I'm running a business, they have this other job, and so we're working on the business stuff. When we get into personal stuff, where's your spouse? Okay. Finance, outside of infidelity, financial stress is the #1 cause for divorce in America. And so I'm not going to add to that statistic. I'm going to detract from it. Yes, sir?
I do have a question. So, and you just answered part of it, that you do coach businesses as well, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Do you take the same approach with a business as you do personal, or what's your approach to coaching a business versus personal?
There's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of crossover. We still have to establish the goals, the dreams, the what would be awesome. We have to establish the why. We have to understand what the blockers are, and then we have to implement some action steps to get through those blockers. So that part doesn't change. Some of the approach to it may change. So if we were to follow, again, the Dave Ramsey process, he has a 7 baby step process, $1,000 emergency fund, pay off all debt except for the mortgage, and then build your emergency fund up. Well, with a business, you have to have retained earnings. You got to pay people, you got to pay yourself. So $1,000 isn't going to cut it, right? So there are tweaks and there's nuances that apply to business. And then there's action items that we do in business that we wouldn't do in our personal life. So it's I hate to give a vague answer, but it's a case by case basis.
Right. So now, say when you get a business client, on average, because I know that they're probably going to vary. How often do you meet with them to update where they are at in the plan?
In the beginning stages of coaching, it's a lot more frequently. So a lot of those businesses we're meeting every other week for the first 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, because there's got to be some hand holding because we're shifting mindsets, right? And if we're shifting mindsets, someone's been in business for 10 years, it doesn't happen like that. Someone's been doing their own finances for 10 years, it doesn't happen like that. And then we back off a little bit more further out time, based on need, based on perceived need, and also based on how hard do you want to be pushed? Well, I want to be pushed to 5. Okay, I'm probably not the coach for you. If you're 5 or below, I'm probably not going to coach you. I'm be like, here's a refund. Come back when you are ready to put the pedal in the metal. But timeline also is adjusted based on need and based on desired outcomes. So we're focused on outcomes, and everybody's outcomes are different. So some people are like, give me something to do, I'll see you in 4 weeks, and 4 weeks later they've done everything and more that I've told them to do, and they're ready for the next thing. And some people are like, well, I did half of them, so I need to see them every other week to keep them going, and hold accountability is a huge part of coaching.
I have another question. Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
When it comes to couples that you're counseling, do you believe, from your experience, that opposites attract?
Absolutely. So, again, to borrow some of the Ramsey lingo, we refer to him as nerd and free spirit. Obviously, I like spreadsheets. That makes me a nerd. How dare you? Claire's the free spirit. Claire's the balloon. I'm the weight. Right? But we offset, and it doesn't mean that nerds don't ever spend money. Sometimes there's nerds who spend money, and there's free spirits who are tight. But they're like, oh, let's go on an adventure. And where are we going? I don't know. Let's go to the airport and find the cheapest ticket and just go for 3 days. How about that? I don't know. Right? Opposites almost always attract. Almost every couple has a nerd and a free spirit, and then how they display that is going to be different. But we need the opposites.
So now I have 2 questions. So my first question was, are you seeing more of a certain generation? Are you seeing more younger people versus older people that are more interested in becoming more financially educated?
I feel like that's a little bit of a loaded question, because this is a young professionals group, but not everybody in here is the same generation.
Yeah.
We welcome them all, by the way.
We do, absolutely.
Are you seeing a little bit of both?
I'm seeing some of everything. I've coached 18-year-olds all the way up to a 91-year-old. So
That gives me hope for the 18-year-olds, by the way. That's why I asked that.
Last week I met with a couple who's 68 and 75, and they're like, we've got $250,000 in debt, what do we do? We're still working and pulling Social Security and. And so I said, hey, here's some things to do. Let's work on these things. Let's reconvene at the beginning of the year. They're not clients of mine yet, but they've already told me we need this, because we weren't taught, and now we're 68 and 75. I think that the millennial and the Gen Zs are a little bit more willing to invest in coaching, because we've grown up in a society where mental health and getting the help that we need is more prevalent than my parents.
Yeah.
My parents were like, whoa, that's expensive. And I'm like, but is it? Right? Is this expensive for the transformation? If you're looking at it, hey, you get paid that much per hour. I don't get paid my coaching fee per hour. Not at all. Right? There's a lot of work that goes in on the front end, on the back end, continuing education, all those other things. Entrepreneurs in here, we know that what we charge goes to the client isn't pure profit. So, but some of the older generation does think in a per hour mindset, right? Especially anybody who grew up in a household where their parents or their grandparents had pensions, they're still hanging on to certain mindsets that they're like, oh, we should get pensions. Our generation, Gen Z and millennials, are like, Social Security ain't gonna be there. We gotta educate ourselves and make sure that we got a nest egg to cover, right? So I view a higher willingness, but I do see people of all ages.
That's a good thing. Second question, are you seeing more couples than you see single people, or vice versa? Or maybe a little bit of both?
I think it ebbs and flows. I wouldn't say that I could put a percentage on it. It ebbs and flows. My favorite demographic is the entrepreneurs, because I like the complexity of it. I like to create multiple spreadsheets with them. But interestingly enough, like a lot of the solopreneurs, the work is really, really heavy because there's a lot of gray area between what's business, what's personal, and some of it's not. So some of it's just like groundwork that should have been done before starting and creating a business account and separating those things out. And sometimes we're playing catch up with a lot of that stuff. So there's a good mix, and it changes from time to time. Sometimes I'm coaching 60% businesses and 40% individuals and couples, and sometimes it's 80% couples and individuals, and less than businesses.
I appreciate your journey and how you represent this industry. It's fantastic. I'm glad I made it here tonight. In your story, okay, I'm going to throw a couple things at you.
Hey, yo, I'm about to get coached. Just
Great story. In your story, first of all, when you identified the mold, okay, that was defining your success. This mold that was on you that you say we all have on us. Where did you see that it came from? And then what did you do internally to grow and change to break the mold so that the goal became attainable? Because the goal without the growth is unattainable.
Right.
Was it the Ramsey system that helped you make those pivots and that building that out in order for you to grow and become what you needed to be to have what you put up on that screen? That's power.
Yeah. I think the system let me see that it was possible. So one of the things that I do love about Ramsey books is that they're written in story form. They have a lot of people's stories. It's not just, hey, here's a bunch of data and graphics, which I like those books too. Don't get me wrong. If they put a spreadsheet in there, I'm gonna read the spreadsheet, not flip past it. But there's stories after stories after stories, and people share, hey, this is what our income was, this is what our debt was, this is how long it took us to pay that off, this is what we did to do that. So I think that inspired the hope that it's possible, and then I was like, okay, well, if they did it, I can do it, right? So now I gotta figure out the how. How do I need to do it? So, for example, with the how on paying for college, I did work on an on-campus job because me and my brother shared a vehicle, and so we tried to go get off-campus jobs, it's a little more challenging. I made friends with the right people, and I got 2 on-campus jobs, which was not against the rules, but it wasn't really encouraged. And so I was working 2 jobs there. I was working 2 and 3 jobs in the summer, and it was just like, this is the goal. And so this is what I have to do. And when failure is not an option, then the how happens, right? When the why is powerful enough, the how will happen. So I think part of the why is also, as I mentioned, previous generations. One of my grandpas passed in 2020, and he always had a car payment. Just always reliable transportation, right, is the excuse there. And I saw it as a mindset in multiple different people, and I'm like, yeah, but my car repair this month is less than having that recurring every single month. So again, to me, that didn't make sense, just the pure math of it. But it was very sad to me that the minimal amount that he would draw out of his retirement nest egg was almost exactly what the car payment would be for the whole year. And to me, that kills me. And again, amazing man, worked his tail off. He drove a truck in Atlanta for 50 years. In fact, before GPSs were a thing, if we got lost, we went to a payphone, called him and said, I'm at the intersection of such and such and such and such. And if you were at the house, you'd see him with the corded phone close his eyes, and it's like the whole map of Atlanta's going on in his brain, and he says, go up this many exits, you'll be able to turn around, there's a good roundabout there, it's not hard to do, you'll come back this many miles and you'll know where you're at. Call me if you get lost. Man of God, raised 5 incredible kids, but when it came to finances, he just didn't take the time.
What'd you say about the front of that about he bought a car or payment or something?
His car payment was equal to what he would draw out of his IRAs.
Oh, I understand. He always had a car.
Always had a car
I
payment.
misunderstood.
Yeah. So there's even little things like that are just the power of observation that just say, I don't want that. I want to do something different. And then going and finding what different is.
One last, because I love the analogy you gave. You go into the casino of life, you put all your chips on you. Okay. So important to find that freedom that you're talking about. Where you being the weight and the light being the balloon, right? Fantastic. Where did you guys find that intersection where you came into pulling together to say those things you listed up there that you've done, this is what we're going to do together? A lot of times we're in our individual careers, we have different success we define, we're growing towards. But for both of you to break that mold, and I'd love to hear your wife's perspective on this too. We'll get you the mic first. But where did you guys say, this is it, and you found that agreement to say, this is how we're going to define? So that's what you put up there, you've been able to do, and where is it going to go in 2 years?
Well, you go first.
I think that we found the agreement by just choosing each other in the relationship first. You know, we know that we're on each other's team, and we're one team. So we're choosing before we choose our finances or our time or any of that. We're choosing each other, and that we're on the same team. And then whatever forward vision looks like as a team, it looks like doing it together and being on the same page. And so we don't think the same. So it's not. I'm not saying that's easy. But it takes conversation and communication, and it takes doing it all the time. Like it's not like on December 20th, 1992 we came and we knew. Like we have to every week. Like okay, what are we doing this week? Okay, like how are we choosing each other this week? Or like there's some financial decisions that need to be made. Are we on the same page? No, we're not. I think it this way. He thinks it this way. Like what does the compromise look like? You know. And I think that. But at the root of that is we're choosing each other, and we're choosing to know that each other is the best thing that we've got, and we're betting on each other together, and knowing that any decision we're making is stemming from that. And yeah, it doesn't make it easy, but I think we constantly have to reevaluate and realign. It's not saying like our perspectives are always the same or we're always going in the same direction, but we're constantly willing to like realign with each other and have conversations. I think conversations are really important, no matter if it's a financial conversation or big conversation or any conversation. Just sitting down and talking about gets us in the right direction.
Yeah, that's a huge part. Right before we got married, we went through a course called Love and Respect by Ernst. And he used an analogy that we continue to use to this day, and he said that I look at life through blue-colored glasses. She looks at life through pink-colored glasses. And so when I get into my dogmatic, legalistic, this is how it's supposed to be, nerd, and she gets into that, but one of us eventually says, hey, we're in a crazy cycle. And she's looking at it pink, and I'm looking at blue, and I'm like, how do we look at this purple? Or whatever color pink and blue make. It's probably periwinkle, right? Purplish. And so we do catch ourselves doing that. Some great finance education books and mindset books written by Tom Stanley. The Millionaire Next Door, The Millionaire Mind, and Stop Acting Rich and Live Like a Real Millionaire. All three of those books are fantastic, but one of the number one factors that he said in people who are self-made millionaires, not inheritance, not hit the lottery, not any of that stuff, self-made millionaires, is they married the right person. Right? Claire and I married our best friends. And we love each other even at times when she don't like me. Or when I'm sitting through a story with, well, on colleagues. But we do choose each other, and we, even when we want to be dogmatic, like, hey, we're on the same team, let me try to see it from your perspective, you try to see it from my perspective, and then that's how we reach our best compromise. You know, let's have no life for 3 years. No, let's not live with regret. Okay, right, find that, and find a balance, and we can't come to a compromise where one of us is just saying fine to get the conversation over with, and then resent it later. Once we came up with my 35th birthday, I was like, we don't have to split the 3 and the 10 years right in the middle. That makes sense, right? And so that was a fantastic thing. Cool. Alan, did you have another question?
Yeah, this is a pretty somber thing, but it's very, very true. By having gone through what I went through in my life, marrying the wrong person, not really having, it really screws your life up. It screws your whole financial, everything, all your plans, it really does. You can be on a trajectory and doing very well, it looks good, but behind closed doors, when things are not going well, and then it all falls apart, it can take you years and decades sometimes to fully recover from it.
Yeah, it's worth having the tough conversations, and again,
I
that's
try
what's-
very hard with my kids to say, and some of them listen and some of them haven't.
Yeah, it's worth having the tough conversations, and repeating some tough conversations, and reevaluating, and like I say, iteration after iteration after iteration, what is freedom and what is success, and where are we going. I couldn't tell you 2 years from now, but we're having fun, and we're enjoying the process.
You talk about kind of a big piece of it is just kind of breaking that mold of that, okay, life is going to be working 9 to 5, I'm going to have a housing, I'm going to have a car payment, I'm going to have expensive with kids, and betting on yourself to take that step or make that investment, whatever it may be, financial, time, etc. What is your advice as far as like getting someone to step out of that comfort zone, the familiar, and step into, okay, this will hopefully go the way I want it to, but there's always that fear, and maybe it doesn't, and then you have a retreat.
Yeah.
So, what is your advice as far as like getting someone to step out like that, take that chance?
So more than advice, I have a question.
It's not a hard part, okay.
What's your default future if you make no changes?
Can you speak up a little bit, Jesse?
What's your default future if you make no changes?
Comfort.
Is it?
Struggling, it depends. For somebody who's not making changes, is your default future to be struggling from day to day or
Yeah.
and not growing?
Could be
78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and we live in the richest country in the world. In fact, if you earn $31,000 a year or more, you're in the top 1% of global earners.
How many are going to math right now?
So, how do we go all in on ourselves? Well, failure's not an option. My default future looks pretty grim if I make no changes. That's how we get outside. That's how we break the mold and take the risk. Right? Sometimes it's taking the risk, and then we got to do a little bit of a dance, readjust. It's not a straight path. So, but my immediate question, my immediate thought is, what's the default future? And am I okay with that? Right. Am I comfortable with my discomfort, or am I willing to get uncomfortable for a short period of time? So when I work with somebody paying off debt, they're like, well, I'll pay all this off in X number of years. Okay, but you're telling me right now that you're where you're stuck with paycheck to paycheck. Okay. What if we get a second job for 18 months, knock it all out, and it sucks for 18 months, and then woohoo, freedom, right? What if we have no life for 3 years and pay off, right? And it's not with the house, but it's with the other stuff. And then what if we change our habits? And then what if? And what if? So I ask the default future, and we go down that rabbit hole, and sometimes the default future gets dark. Then we have to play the what if game. And and what would be awesome game. And the light at the end of the tunnel is not an ongoing training, right? But we have to have hope. If there's no hope, then why would I change? Right?
Yes.
Scary. Yeah. So my very first clients came to me freaking out. 2020 was a crazy year for all of us. They're the ones that I mentioned had taken out $300,000 in student loans. The balance 8 years later was $360,000. Payments were not getting smaller; they were going up. We added up all of their debt, not including the mortgage, and it was $570,000 in debt. That year, income was down to $250,000. And some of us were like, well, I don't make $250,000 if I make, okay. But if you had $50,000 in debt and made $25,000, I actually, on my piece of paper, I wish I'd saved that paper. I moved the decimal over like we do in grade school so that I could comprehend the numbers. So they hired me right off the bat. Like, we need help. We don't know what we're doing. And I asked them in our first coaching session, I said, how long do you want this to take? How long do you think it's going to take? Like, it's going to take us 10 years. And maybe my filter was a little bit dirty or, was just off. I said, if it takes you 10 years, you're not trying. And the eyes got real big. And they still showed up the next coaching session. They didn't fire me on the spot. But at the end of that session, they said, give me a different timeline. And they said, well, the second coaching session, they said, we think we can do it in 5. I'm like, okay, paying off $100,000 a year in debt. Now, they had the income to do it. Right? I said, cool. At the end of that session, I said, I want a month and year, let's get extra clear. And I thought they were going to tell me like 4.5 years away or whatever, and they said, this would have been November of 2020. They said, August of 2022, we're going to be debt free. I said, what changed? They said, hope. Right, so we went through the exercises of what if and what are we aiming for. We know where we are now. Now sucks, but we need to know what we're aiming for and what our why is. They actually beat that timeline by 4 months. They paid off $507,000 in debt in 20 months. And then the very next coaching session, she said, Jesse, what do we do with all this money? It's not going anywhere. It's not leaving.
My rate just went up.
At the time, and she was a spreadsheet person. She sent me a 12-month-long spreadsheet, and I was like, at first glance, I said, you have $9,000 a month. It's just missing. Where is it? That was step one for them. We identified where the money was missing. A family of 4 was spending almost $2,500 a month on food. DoorDash. There was like 6 different categories in food. Right? We're like, okay, what's realistic? What do we need to do? And they didn't make like major sacrifices. It wasn't beans and rice and beans and scorched earth and spam for the protein. But it was intentionality and it was a plan and it was hope. They did dramatically increase their income. They went and worked extra. They sold some assets, paid it off in 20 months. In September, so they hired me in September of 2020. September of this year, they said, hey, we've opened our own private practice and we'd like you to come do a seminar for our team. So 4 years later, they rehired me to come talk to their team for the next, their business generation. Part of their what would be awesome was to be private practitioners and be entrepreneurs. Run their own business. So I had the honor of doing that 2 weeks ago. Went down to Orlando area and got to speak to their team. Just had a living room discussion, but it was super cool to see that transformation. And then that's a story that I use all the time. But the initial response is, "Look, I don't make that kind of money." And they went from $250 1 year to $418 the next, and they're like, "Well, I can't make that." Yeah, but if you make 25 and you bump it up to 41, by working a little extra, those are the numbers that on average we're working with. So it's not about the big dollar amounts, it's about the ratios. We knock a zero off the end, the numbers are the same, and if not better, for most people. So major transformation.
I have a question, because, you know, I'm not young, but the young.
Yeah, you're young.
So, you know, we hear the stories with you and your wife that balloon the weight, and there's a yin to the yang and a balance there, but a lot of the young don't have that yin. So therefore, how do they hold themselves accountable in a disciplinary fashion and have, because, you know, you two weigh each other out, well, they're constantly weighing their own self out in their mind, and they may not be making the right choices.
Community, and more community.
Yeah.
Right.
So do you
and
do
choosing
that?
and choosing your community.
Yeah.
Right. If you find a community that's going a path that you don't want to go, don't stick around. Right? And it's easier said than done to adjust our friends, but it is fairly easy to find somebody who's succeeding and going the direction that you want to, at least in one area. Like when I have fitness questions, I go to Ray's husband Danny. Okay, if he was here, like his arms were busting out of his polos. Like, Danny, I'm bored with my workouts. Give me something new to do. And he's got stuff just tucked away, right? That's his thing. So I go to somebody who's successful in that area, right? If I have let's blow my business up, and if I have a marketing question, I'm gonna call Quan. Everybody's seen 30 different vehicles that say Duckman Mechanical.
Right.
And if he's not using the vehicles, you know what he does? He has his guys just park them around town, right? Not paying for a billboard, he's just parking in public parking spaces. In fact, he invited me to go play at a golf tournament, a charity golf tournament. He's like, it's already paid for. He said, can you meet me at CF? And he parked his truck and boat there while we went to the golf tournament. It's a public parking lot, so it was a billboard. He had like 6 people text him while we were playing golf. Hey man, saw the boat. Right, so he's out there in front of him. So if I have a marketing question, that's who I'm going to go to, right? And so it's finding the experts in a certain field and saying, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Right? Can I pick your brain? Can I ask you these questions? Right? So finding those experts. And sometimes those experts are coaches, and sometimes those experts are mom and dad, and sometimes those experts are coming to 1 million cups. And, you know, it's just surrounding yourself with the right community. Find someone who's going where you're going, but they're a little bit ahead of you, and then follow in their footsteps. It reminds me of, so back in 1992, there was a big blizzard up in North Georgia, and we lived in Blairsville, and I would have been like 3 or 4 at the time. It was like 3 foot of snow, and we had a sedan, and didn't have power, so we had to walk. Me and my 2 older brothers, my parents, we had to walk out like half a mile out to the road. So my dad was taking these giant steps and creating a path so that we could hop. And for us, it was a game. Like, we didn't know, hey, they're super stressed out because there's no power and we're all trying not to freeze to death and blah, blah, blah. For us, it was a game, but I was following those footsteps. Someone had been there, done that, and charted the course. And gave me a clear path so that I didn't fall faceplant in the snow and get stuck. So.
I have a question. So have you had a client that has not succeeded, and what would you pinpoint as the factors for that?
Yes. Sadly, I have someone that immediately comes to mind. Paid in full up front for 6 months of coaching. I asked them, hey, how hard do you want me to push you? And then they gave me numbers like an 8 and a 9. So I started pushing, and I kept getting met with opposition and excuses and some things. So I ended up backing off. Okay, so at the end of 6 months, they're like, hey, we're good, we're done. I was like, how was your experience? They're like, man, not that great. I was like, okay. Really, honestly, a good income, and I think they had eliminated like $2,000 in debt, which almost happened by default. They said, well, you didn't push us very hard. I was like, fair, I accept that. I said, can we agree that I backed off, but can we agree that you guys mentioned these excuses? And they're like, yeah, well, so we all took responsibility around the table, and it was handled, honestly, very tactfully. I'm pretty proud of me on that one. So what I did was I said, listen, you want accountability, you want me to put the pedal to the metal on this? I said, you accomplish these 3 action items, and I will give you another coaching session free of charge. I said, and I will give you up to 3 if you guys feel that is fair, but you have to meet and complete your action items every single time. I said, and don't call or email unless you have a question about it, but if it's not complete, we're not scheduling. And I haven't heard from him in 2.5 years. So, there's been some people that are like, hey, back off, and there's been a few people that quit. And then that couple didn't want the discomfort. And a lot of what we go through is discomfort, and I have to be the bad guy who says, hey, let's do this uncomfortable thing. 9 months before Claire and I got married, I worked about 90 hours a week. I worked a full-time commission job and put all of that in the bank. I worked a part-time, absolute worst job I've ever worked, night shift at a crummy little Ramada Inn in a not great part of town in Pensacola, Florida. And I lived off of my part-time paycheck 3 nights a week. And those 3 nights a week, I was getting about 3 hours of sleep. And then on the weekends, I was doing painting jobs and pressure washing and cleaning out gutters and all those kinds of things. So when people are like, well, you didn't have that, so you don't know what it's like. You don't know. No, but we choose our part. We choose the path that we want to go down. And I said, Claire had enough money to pay for her senior year of college. And I wanted to make sure we didn't just get the newlywed furniture off the side of the road, and that's all we had. It did help that I worked at a furniture store and got stuff at cost plus 25%. But I wanted to make sure that we started out well. And so I did know those sacrifices, and so I've lived some of those sacrificial times. So on those things I can't speak to it, but the clients that don't have success or don't have great success are the ones who really aren't willing to step outside of the comfort of now, like Colton called it, like, no, this is comfortable. It's a known discomfort. It's not actually comfortable. And so the known discomfort versus the unknown discomfort is where we feel comfortable and we're willing to resort back to that discomfort.
I'll be real fast. I see you get ready to go. Okay. In your intake session, 2 things. Where do you find that where you need to be, where you say, not all business is good business? and we've been there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then secondly, what is your expectation? Now I'm picking entrepreneurs. Okay. What is your expectation that they need to understand the time frame to build out what coaching is going to do for them? I mean, because I'll just show you.
Yeah.
Usually, the work that I do is 6, 9, 18 months, at least once a month.
Yeah.
With drop-ins.
Right.
And I find that a person working a job with a job mindset, which is fine, okay, trying to cross that barrier of understanding how an entrepreneur looks at things, looks at cost versus investment.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you sense that and know where this is going to go?
So the primary question is, how do you communicate a timeline that it's going to take at least this amount of time to see some success? Okay. On one side, now I've been doing it long enough that I have stories of somebody who probably has similar numbers, right? In the beginning, it was a lot more difficult to communicate that. I also go based off of averages that I've seen, right? On average, I see greater successes happen in month 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I do offer 6 months of coaching, but I strongly recommend and I incentivize the 12-month agreement with the option to continue at the end of either one. So to work with me for only 6 months is more expensive per month than to work with me for 12. And I tell the client to their face, hey, I'm incentivizing you to do this because clients see a greater success rate by sticking around longer. I've had some clients who showed up for 3 months and then they quit and they canceled their card and I haven't heard from them in years. So I don't know how they're doing. And then I have one couple that I've been coaching for, so I've been coaching for 4 years and I've been coaching them for 40 months. Now I meet with them quarterly, because now they're on a really great track record, and like, we need the accountability, and you're around until one of us probably isn't around. Cool. But the probability of eliminating everything and accomplishing all of our goals in a matter of 6 months, in our first coaching session, we talked about short-term goals, long-term goals, medium-term goals, right? What's 20 years from now look like as far as we can see it now? 10 years from now, 20 years from now is going to look different than it did 10 years ago. So we want to set some realistic 90 to 180 day goals. I had a coaching session yesterday with a couple who've been coaching for 5 months, and out of their 6 month goals, they accomplished all of them in 4. So they're just crushing it. Some of the longer term goals are a little bit behind because there's $1,200 in car repairs last month. Right? So communicating, that's very challenging, and everybody's going to go at their own pace. But with the client, I said, you get to choose our starting timeline, and you get to choose the pace at which we go. I'm going to push you as hard as you let me push you. But ultimately, I'm not getting in there paying their bills. I'm not working a second job for them. I'm not, going grocery shopping for them. They have to do the implementation. And I use this analogy. Most of us, Colton aside, got to at least remember watching Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant play basketball. Phil Jackson got to coach both of those guys, so talk about a charmed coaching career. However, Phil Jackson wore a coat and stood on the sidelines. He drew plays up, but he didn't shoot the ball. They had to implement, right? And sometimes the implementation, sometimes that game-winning shot didn't fall, but sometimes it did. And Phil probably doesn't get enough credit, and I'm not looking for credit, but he helped them with the implementation. Those guys invested and they listened, whereas LeBron gets his coaches fired. Kobe and Michael have more rings, so.
And on that note,
sorry, Gen Z.
Ouch. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank y'all for having me.
One last thank you to our sponsors, USB, of course. You can give them a round of applause. Coach just walked in the building. Passionately late. We love you. And also, of course, yes, you were. Yeah. Also, the Eustis Chamber. Thank you to the Eustis Chamber. We appreciate all of your help. Join us next month, our event on December 17th. We're going to listen to Jim Green. He's going to be our next speaker next month. And yay, Jim. We're going to call it a night. Thank you guys so much for coming. We appreciate all of you.
Please take some more food.
Take the food.
Take to go, please. Take to go, drink.
Yeah, that's cool. We can be scheduled. I have meetings at random times, so I could do anytime Thursday. Yeah. Do you want to do Zoom or do you want to be over in this area?
Pardon me.